Good evening. Welcome, everyone, to the bonus part of a six-part course on the laws of maintaining a kosher home. Today, we are going to focus on two things, cheese, or more specifically, actually, we're focusing on milk, something called Chol Yisrael, as well as blood spots, focusing on eggs. So let's start with Chol Yisrael. What is Chol Yisrael, and what's the reason for Chol Yisrael? Okay, so let's jump in, and Josh, you want to read this for us, please?
Sure.
On the big screen. Yeah.
In order to prevent the mixture of milk from non-kosher animals into kosher milk, i.e. cow milk or milk from other kosher species, Chazal prohibited us to consume milk which was milked by a Gentile without a Jew supervising. Even if a Gentile farmer has no non-kosher species of animals present when he milks his cows, his milk is nevertheless prohibited by this gezerah, rabbinic prohibition, unless there is provision to ensure that milk from non-kosher animals was not mixed in.
Okay. They made a decree, and this decree, different than the other decrees, the previous decrees that we discussed of the Chachamim, was more to keep the Jews separate from the non-Jews. We didn't want the Jews to be, God forbid, coming too far with non-Jews and marrying them, to prevent assimilation. Here is a problem of non-kosher. Maybe they would slip in a little bit of non-kosher milk from pig, from camel, into the kosher milk. Okay, and because they said if there was no Jew who saw the milking process, who saw it taking place, who saw the animals and saw the kosher animals, if it's not chalav, milk, Yisrael, that was watched over by a Jew when it was being taken out, and when the cows are giving the milk, or whatever the animal is giving the milk, then it's not kosher. It can't be eaten. It's a decree that applies till this very day. This is the halachic ruling, and therefore, just like by bread, it's not enough just to have an OU or an OK, whatever the certification is. It has to say chalav Yisrael. This is milk, and not just as kosher because we sometimes have a Jew checking in on it, which generally is okay. It's no, there was a Jew there by the entire milking process of this specific batch of cows, or right, any sheep, goats, but we're talking about cows in just most commonly. So that would be chalav Yisrael. If not, it's not kosher for a Jewish person to eat. And not only that, it's considered to give timtum halev hamayach. Sometimes we're just like in a spiritual environment, but our hearts, it's not responding, or our brain is thick. It's ideas of spiritual ideas aren't getting through to our head. It's called a stuffing up, timtum halev. Our heart's stuffed up. Our mind is stuffed up. One of the things that could come from is from eating chalav Yisrael, from eating milk, that even though maybe from a kosher animal, it wasn't observed to have been from a kosher animal when the milking process happened. Therefore, that would be a problem. It would not be allowed to be eaten there because it's not chalav Yisrael. Okay. Now, a lot of Jews today in America, or some Jews say, well, we don't have, chalav Yisrael doesn't apply anymore. Okay. What are they saying? First of all, the rules, of course, apply. You can't change the rules. The Torah will never change. The rules are here to stay. However, what they're saying is that nowadays there's a leniency. And here's the basis of this leniency. Generally taken out of context, but here's the leniency. Moshe Feinstein was asked, he was one of the great poskim, leading halachic and authoritative leaders of the past generation. He was asked in a situation where there's no milk available. There's no chalav Yisrael milk available. There's no milk that was overseen by a Jew. You're in a little town in Alabama. There's a child that needs calcium. There's no option. Could we then, in that scenario, where there's no kosher chalav Yisrael milk available, then could we give the kid just regular kosher milk? So Moshe wrote a letter basically saying that in this unique situation where the child needs milk and there's no kosher chalav Yisrael milk available, you can, and he explained why. He said, since we're in America and the USDA and the Food Health Board has oversight on all the food being served and sold, so they're going to make sure generally that there's all the milk is exactly what it says. It says cow's milk, it's cow's milk. Therefore, because of that, we could say that would take place of chalav Yisrael. Hence, we could drink it at a time. The children could drink it at a time when they have no other choice. Okay, but a few things. So if you're going to even use that leniency of Rabbi Moshe Rabbi Moshe, which not everyone does. But even then, you can only use it in a place where there's no other Chalav Yisrael available. Okay, and even if so, even if you're in a place where there's no Chalav Yisrael available, even then, only you should do it if you need it for the strengthening of your body. But ultimately, you should not be eating something that's not Chalav Yisrael, especially us living in New York City, where there's plenty of Chalav Yisrael, there's plenty of Chalav Yisrael milk. There's multiple brands. There's a lot of Chalav Yisrael cheese. Even at Costco, there's Chalav Yisrael cheese. So we definitely should not be relying on the leniency of Rav Moshe. We should keep the halacha, which was set up as Chalav Yisrael. That we have to have a Jew there at the process when they are milking the cow. Any questions on this? It's commonly brought up. Obviously, Chalav means milk. Yisrael that was overseen by a Jew when they milked it. Any questions?
So let's say cream cheese, for example, that says OU on it, but then this I say Chalav Yisrael. Is it a automatic thing? Like, can you just assume that it's?
It's. Oh, say it again. It says Chalav Yisrael on it.
So, no, if it does not say, like for example, like Tempty cream cheese says
no.
There's an
OU on it. No, if it doesn't say Chalav Yisrael, we have to assume it's not Chalav Yisrael.
Even if it has an OU on it, where
no, and OU will tell you clearly their standard is when it comes to dairy. If it doesn't say, I gave you this morning. If I didn't give you Chalav Yisrael, sorry, someone just interrupted me. If I didn't, let me focus for a second to remember what I was saying. If the OU will tell you that their standard is that if it just says OUD, it's not Chalav Yisrael, unless it clearly stipulates otherwise. And that's the general policy of general kosher certifications. They will say Chalav Yisrael, unless, I think, let's say, in some of the Israeli kosher certifications, hechsher symbols, like the Eidah HaCharedis of Yerushalayim, it's called Badach Eidah HaCharedis, the Eidah HaCharedis community in Yerushalayim. I think all their products, they will only certify a dairy product that is Chalav Yisrael. So they don't insist that it then says Chalav Yisrael. Although I think most of the time it does, because they also want you to know this is a dairy product, and that's one of their ways of letting you know it's a dairy product. So since the OU doesn't insist that everything has to be Chalav Yisrael, whether because could be for some of the reasons mentioned, the leniency in a situation where they don't have, etc. So in those kosher certifications, it needs to clearly write next to it Chalav Yisrael. It's a Chalav Yisrael product. Sometimes it's tricky because sometimes you'll have the same product. An example is sometimes you'll have like cheeses. I know Costco has, right? Some of them are Chalav Yisrael and some of them are not. You have to look at the packaging because it's the same type of product. Some were made Chalav Yisrael, but specifically milk that would have oversight of a Jew and some not. Good question. Okay. Now we move to the second point, which is a Jew cannot eat blood. It's a clear prohibition of the Torah. We are not allowed to eat blood. Okay. What does that include when we say not to eat blood? Well, when we slaughter an animal, we're allowed to eat meat or chicken. True, fowl. But we're not allowed to eat the blood of those animals. So what do? We salt them, right? Part of the preparing of meat, that it should be kosher meat, is after it's a kosher animal, which is slaughtered correctly, and we check the lungs and make sure there's no, this wasn't an animal that was about to die anyways, it was a deathly illness, then we have to salt it to take out the blood. A separate prohibition, can't eat blood. Take out the blood. We must take out the blood. So if you salt the meat, the salting takes out the blood. So then even afterwards, of course, there's red juice inside of the meat. We say, okay, but that's not blood anymore. We've already taken out the blood. Okay. But a common other place where you might find blood, and therefore it has to be checked, is eggs. Okay, so we're going to discuss eggs, and we're going to see by the eggs here, and I'm going to speak this out, but you could read it, you see it in the screen here, in just a moment, is that eggs, okay, will only really have blood if they're fertilized, right? So if there's a hen and a rooster together, so then there might be blood because there might be developing a child, okay? So I'm just going to read over here. Of course, fertilized eggs will also in the right conditions grow into chickens. In modern commercial egg operations, this hormone enhancement is achieved by artificial means through the feed. The eggs themselves are not fertile. They will never develop into chickens. While in the past, every blood spike might have signified the beginning of a new embryo, today's commercial methods virtually ensure this is not the case. So we're almost sure that if you don't have like organic or natural eggs, and I think Alyssa Newman now Sham, she had mentioned this, that she when she was getting basically like organic eggs, there was a lot of blood spots because those were eggs that haven't fertilized, and that's a lot of times the farmers want them fertilized so that there's more fertilization and more eggs, and it gets better eggs, or potentially create a chicken. So if you see a blood spot, that's not kosher. You can't eat that blood spot. Okay. So what do you have to do? I think in the next slide it will tell us where we're concerned, but essentially you have to check the egg, crack it open, and see, right, when is the accepted practice to check each individual egg prior to use. We crack open the egg and we check it. That's what we do, okay? Because where there's a doubt. Now, what's the doubt? The doubt is that maybe there was a fertilized egg here with a drop of blood. If you crack open an egg and you find a drop of blood, what is the rule? The rule is just take out the drop of blood. You don't have to throw out the whole egg. Just take out the little bit of blood. Just like if the meat used to have blood, we use salt to remove the blood. We can eat the meat. We're not throwing out the whole meat because it had blood inside of it. We don't have to throw out the whole egg. Eggs are cheap today, so a lot of people say, I'll throw it out. It's easier. No problem. You could do that. You're not obligated. Technically, you just have to remove the blood spots. If there's a little blood spot. Sometimes the whole, there's literally, if you saw the organic chicken, like literally an embryo is starting to grow. Of course, they have to throw the whole thing out. But if not, you just have to remove the blood spots. Now, what about, there's a lot of products, mayonnaise being from the most famous, that they make out of eggs, okay? And they didn't check those eggs for blood. So if we have a doubt, you're allowed to eat the food. We don't know that there was a blood spot here. We don't know that there was blood. There were a bunch of eggs that were whipped together, created a new entity. If they didn't check them, that's okay, because it's not like we know that there was blood there, especially today, where there's a higher assumption that most eggs, by far, if they were not fertilized, do not and will not have any blood, by far. I mean, it's a rarity to find the blood spots. But there's a famous story where there was a community that was accused of the famous blood libel. What's a blood libel? Well, where they accused the Jews of baking the matzahs with the blood of a Christian child. So the king called the rabbi and said, "What do you say about this accusation?" The rabbi said, "Do me a favor. Call a Jewish woman from the street. Have your guards call any Jewish woman from the street." Okay, they bring in a Jewish woman and they say, "What would you like?" The king says, "What do you want her to do?" So the rabbi says, "Ask her to please make me an egg for the rabbi. Make me an omelet." Okay, the king says this rabbi's a little, but let's see. So they say, "Please make an omelet." They see she cracks the egg. She's moving the egg from one side to the other side to the other side. They say, "What are you doing?" So what am I doing? "I'm checking for blood." Like, what are we talking about? She's like, "Well, I'm making egg for the rabbi. Rabbi doesn't eat blood. None of the Jews eat blood. I have to be extra careful to make sure there's no blood spots." Okay, so the rabbi said, "Okay, you can go now." So the rabbi said, "Listen, if you ask a random Jewish woman and she's checking her blood egg for a blood spot, you think we're going to use the blood of a Christian boy? That's ludicrous. It's against the Torah. It's against Torah to murder, but even if it was already a dead child, it's against Torah to eat blood. It's a clear prohibition, right?" That's just another proof that when they say don't mess me up with the facts, don't confuse me with the facts. In other words, there's a blood libel. Let's check in with the blood libel. It goes against every principle that we would not be allowed to do it from any which angle. We can't murder, we can't use blood, etc. Who cares? They don't mix me up with the facts. They wanted to have a blood libel, they created a blood libel. But for us to take out of this is that we should check our eggs for blood spots. That is what we are luckily supposed to do. If it wasn't checked, or if you have a hard-boiled egg, on a hard-boiled egg, it would be between the white and the yolk, you find a black dot, that would have been a blood spot. And because of that, some people do, Sprat and halacha is never to cook hard-boiled eggs in pairs, rather in odd numbers. Why? Because even if you find that one of them had a blood spot, it's not going to make the other ones non-kosher, because majority, we go after majority. Majority didn't have a blood spot. And therefore, also this pot is still kosher. It's not a problem, because majority of the eggs in the pot were kosher.